Pickup trucks are meant to be tough, rugged, and built for work. But these trucks took a very different path, with bizarre styling, strange proportions, and designs that seem almost impossible to believe. They stand out for all the wrong reasons. Some look more like cartoons than real vehicles, while others leave people wondering what the designers were thinking. These are the 7 world's most goofy pickup trucks you must see to believe. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.
The Daihatsu Midget 2 may be one of the most entertaining and unusual utility vehicles ever placed into mass production. At first glance, it hardly looks like a real truck at all. In fact, many people seeing one for the first time assume it is either a promotional vehicle, a children's amusement park ride, or some kind of experimental prototype that accidentally escaped onto public roads. Yet the Midget 2 was absolutely real. Built by Daihatsu, it represented one of the most extreme interpretations of practical transportation ever attempted. While most pickup trucks are designed around hauling capability, towing power, or passenger comfort, the Midget 2 seemed to ask a completely different question. How small can a truck become before it stops being a truck? Remarkably, Daihatsu found an answer. The result looked like a delivery scooter that had somehow gone through an unexpected evolutionary process and emerged as a miniature pickup truck. The proportions were almost comical. The cab was tiny, the wheelbase was short, and the cargo bed looked as though it had been attached as an afterthought. From some angles, the vehicle appeared more cartoon character than commercial transport. Its front fascia became one of its most recognizable features. With large round headlights and a compact nose, the Midget 2 seemed to have a permanent expression of cheerful surprise. Unlike aggressive trucks that attempt to look tough or intimidating, the Midget looked friendly, harmless, and slightly confused. One observer joked, "It looks like it just found out it's a truck." The design immediately attracted attention. People smiled when they saw it. Children pointed at it. Adults often stopped to ask questions, and almost everyone underestimated how useful it actually was. One of the most unusual aspects of many Midget 2 models was the seating arrangement. Numerous versions featured only one seat. Not one row of seats, one seat. Just enough room for the driver. No passenger, no extra space, no compromise. If somebody wanted a ride, they were out of luck. This unusual configuration made the vehicle seem even more absurd to drivers accustomed to conventional pickups. One owner humorously explained, "My truck has fewer seats than some motorcycles." Another laughed, "When friends ask for a ride, the truck answers for me." Power came from a tiny engine built to satisfy Japan's strict key vehicle regulations. Performance was never the goal. Fuel economy, maneuverability, and efficiency were the priorities. As a result, acceleration could best be described as optimistic. The little engine worked extremely hard simply to maintain normal traffic speeds. Steep hills could feel like major obstacles, and overtaking another vehicle was not something owners attempted casually. One driver joked, "You don't accelerate in a Midget, you submit a request." Another owner described highway merging as a negotiation rather than a maneuver. Yet none of these limitations prevented people from loving the vehicle. In fact, many enthusiasts argue that the lack of speed is part of its charm. The Midget 2 never pretends to be powerful. It never pretends to be fast. It knows exactly what it is. And that's part of what makes it so appealing. Where the Daihatsu Midget 2 truly excelled was in crowded urban environments. Narrow streets, tight alleys, and packed commercial districts were its natural habitat. Areas that frustrated larger vans and trucks barely challenged the little Daihatsu. Parking spaces seemed enormous, loading zones became easy to access, deliveries could be made almost anywhere. The vehicle's tiny footprint transformed what would be obstacles for larger commercial vehicles into minor inconveniences. Small business owners quickly recognized the advantages. Florists used them, bakeries used them, local delivery companies used them, market vendors used them. In crowded Japanese cities, the Midget 2 could accomplish tasks that would have been frustrating or impossible in a full-size truck. One delivery driver summed it up perfectly. "It's slower than everything else, but it gets there anyway." The cargo bed itself wasn't large, but it was surprisingly useful. While nobody was hauling construction equipment or large trailers, the truck could easily carry tools, packages, supplies, groceries, and other everyday cargo. And because the vehicle was so lightweight and economical, operating costs remained extremely low. Another reason the Midget 2 became memorable is because it seemed completely unconcerned with conventional automotive trends. During an era when manufacturers were making vehicles larger, more powerful, and increasingly sophisticated, Daihatsu created something that appeared almost intentionally ridiculous, and yet it worked. That contradiction fascinates enthusiasts today. Modern collectors adore the Midget 2 because it represents a kind of automotive creativity that is becoming increasingly rare. It wasn't built by marketing committees trying to maximize global appeal. It was built to solve a very specific problem in a very specific environment. As a result, it developed a personality unlike almost any other truck. One collector described it perfectly. "It isn't a serious truck, it's a serious solution disguised as a joke." Today, surviving examples have become increasingly desirable among enthusiasts who appreciate unusual vehicles. At car shows, the Midget 2 often attracts more attention than vehicles worth 10 or 20 times as much. People are drawn to it because it challenges their assumptions about what a pickup truck is supposed to be. One owner perhaps captured its appeal best. "Every trip feels like you're driving the world's smallest pickup truck, and that's because you probably are." And that's the enduring magic of the Daihatsu Midget 2. It was tiny, slow, unconventional, and often hilarious, yet it was also brilliantly practical, surprisingly capable within its intended role, and completely unforgettable. In a world full of trucks trying to be bigger, tougher, and more powerful, the Midget 2 became famous by doing exactly the opposite.
The Dodge D100 adult toys pickup may have one of the strangest names and most unforgettable marketing campaigns ever attached to an American truck. During the early 1970s, most pickup manufacturers still sold trucks primarily as tools. Trucks were expected to haul lumber, pull trailers, work on farms, and spend their lives covered in dust, mud, or construction site grime. Appearance was usually a secondary concern. Then, Dodge decided to do something completely different. Instead of marketing pickups strictly as work vehicles, Dodge tried to transform them into lifestyle machines. The company realized that a growing number of younger buyers wanted trucks not because they needed them for work, but because they liked the image. These customers wanted something fun, distinctive, and exciting. The result was the famous Adult Toys campaign. Even the name sounded unusual. In the early 1970s, most truck packages had straightforward names that emphasized toughness, payload, or utility. Calling a pickup an adult toy was almost shocking. It immediately grabbed attention and made people wonder whether the advertisements were serious. Many buyers genuinely thought they weren't. The trucks themselves looked unlike anything typically found at a construction site. Bright colors dominated the lineup. Wild paint combinations appeared across the bodywork. Bold stripes stretched along the sides. Chrome trim sparkled everywhere. Special wheels, sporty accessories, and eye-catching graphics transformed ordinary pickups into rolling advertisements for fun. Parked next to a typical work truck of the era, the D100 adult toys models looked as though they belonged to an entirely different category of vehicle. One observer joked, "It looked like a surfboard company accidentally started building pickups." Another owner laughed. "You could spot one from 3 blocks away, even at night." That visibility was exactly the point. Dodge wanted attention, and attention is exactly what they received. The advertising campaign became almost as memorable as the trucks themselves. Promotional materials featured bright colors, youthful themes, recreational imagery, and a carefree attitude that was highly unusual for truck marketing at the time. Many advertisements focused on leisure activities rather than work. Instead of showing lumber yards or construction projects, Dodge highlighted outdoor adventures, recreation, and personal expression. This was a radical idea. Today, lifestyle trucks are common. In 1972, they were not. The concept of buying a pickup primarily because it looked cool was still relatively new. Some traditional truck buyers were confused. Others laughed. Some dealerships reportedly struggled to explain the concept to older customers accustomed to viewing pickups strictly as tools. One salesman reportedly joked, "Half my customers wanted to buy one, the other half wanted to know what happened to Dodge." Despite the unusual presentation, the trucks themselves remained capable Dodge pickups underneath the graphics and accessories. Buyers could still use them for hauling, towing, and daily transportation. The difference was that these trucks now came wrapped in an image designed to appeal to younger and more image-conscious buyers. In many ways, the adult toys trucks predicted the future. Modern pickup markets are filled with appearance packages, special editions, off-road styling groups, luxury interiors, and lifestyle-focused branding. Trucks are no longer purchased solely for work. Many are bought for recreation, image, and personal expression. The Adult Toys campaign anticipated that trend decades before it became mainstream. Unfortunately, not everyone appreciated the idea at the time. Some buyers viewed the graphics as excessive. Others found the marketing gimmicky. A few thought the trucks looked ridiculous. One critic described them as a muscle car that forgot it was a pickup. Ironically, those same characteristics are exactly what make them desirable today. Because relatively few were preserved, surviving examples have become highly sought after by collectors. Many trucks from the era eventually repainted, modified, or simply worked to death. The bright graphics that once seemed excessive often disappeared entirely during restorations or ownership changes. Finding an original example today is difficult. Finding one with its original appearance intact is even harder. Modern enthusiasts love these trucks because they perfectly capture a unique moment in automotive history, a period when manufacturers were beginning to realize that trucks could be more than tools. One collector summarized their appeal perfectly. They were weird before weird became profitable. Another said, the best thing about them is that nobody would approve a marketing campaign like that today. Looking back, the Dodge D100 Adult Toys pickup feels like a rolling time capsule from the early 1970s. It represents an era when automotive companies were willing to take risks, experiment with unusual ideas, and market vehicles in ways that sometimes bordered on absurdity. The trucks were colorful, they were loud, they were unconventional, and they were impossible to ignore. What once seemed strange has become collectible. What once looked excessive now feels charmingly nostalgic, and what many customers initially thought was a joke has become one of the most memorable special edition pickups ever produced. Today, the Dodge Adult Toys trucks are celebrated not despite their weirdness, but because of it. They stand as proof that sometimes the most unforgettable vehicles are the ones bold enough to embrace their own absurdity.
The Subaru Sambar is one of those vehicles that seems almost impossible the first time you see it. So small, so simple, and so unassuming that it barely registers as a truck in the traditional sense. Built by Subaru, it belongs to Japan's K vehicle category, where strict size and engine regulations forced engineers to solve practical transport problems using extreme compactness rather than raw power or scale. By 1979, when this generation of Sambar pickups was in circulation, Japan's cities were already dense, narrow, and heavily built up. Full-size vehicles struggled in tight streets, small rural lanes, and crowded commercial districts. The Sambar was designed specifically for that world, not for highways, not for long-distance hauling, but for the everyday reality of urban and semi-urban Japan. and it solved that problem in the smallest way possible. Visually, the Subaru Sambar almost looks like a toy that accidentally became road legal. The cab is extremely compact, the bed is barely larger than a few storage crates, and the wheels sit at the corners in a way that makes the whole vehicle look stretched and compressed at the same time. The proportions give it a friendly, almost cartoon-like appearance, especially compared to full-size pickups. Park one next to a large American truck and the contrast is almost comical. It does not just look smaller, it looks like it belongs to a different species of machine entirely. One observer famously joked, "The Sambar doesn't park next to a truck, it parks next to its shadow." Yet the real surprise of the Sambar is not how small it is, it's how useful it is within its intended environment. Despite its tiny engine and lightweight construction, the Sambar was engineered to carry real loads. Within K-class limits, it could carry tools, produce, supplies, and equipment with surprising efficiency. The chassis was simple but robust enough for daily commercial use, and the rear engine layout helped maximize cargo space relative to the vehicle's size. It was not built for speed or long-distance hauling, it was built for constant short trips in difficult spaces, and in that role it was extremely effective. The engine, restricted by K-class regulations, was very small by global standards. Acceleration was modest at best, and highway driving required patience and realistic expectations. These trucks were not designed to compete with full-size pickups or modern traffic speeds on major highways. Instead, they excelled in environments where agility mattered more than power. One owner described the driving experience in a very honest way. "It doesn't rush, it just arrives when the road allows it." That philosophy defined the Sambar's entire existence. Where larger vehicles struggled, the Sambar thrived. Narrow alleys, tight farm paths, crowded markets, and dense urban districts were its natural habitat. Parking was almost effortless. Turning around in confined spaces was rarely a concern. Deliveries could be made where larger trucks simply could not physically fit. For small businesses, that advantage was enormous. Florists, market vendors, repair workers, and rural farmers all found practical value in its compact footprint. It turned logistical limitations into manageable problems simply by being small enough not to create them in the first place. One delivery driver summed it up perfectly. "It's not fast, but it never gets stuck where bigger trucks give up." There is also an emotional aspect to the Sambar's appeal that goes beyond pure utility. Its appearance, rounded, friendly, and almost playful, creates an immediate sense of approachability. Unlike aggressive utility vehicles that project strength, the Sambar feels harmless and cooperative, which is part of why it attracts so much attention outside Japan. People smile when they see it, they point at it, they often underestimate it, and then they learn what it can actually do. Today, the Subaru Sambar has gained cult status among enthusiasts worldwide, especially in places where K-trucks are rare imports. Collectors appreciate it not for power or luxury, but for its engineering honesty. It's a vehicle that knows exactly what it is and refuses to pretend otherwise. One enthusiast described it in a fitting way. "It's the smallest truck that never lies about being small." And that is the essence of the Sambar. It was never meant to compete with full-size pickups. It was meant to solve problems in places where full-size pickups simply do not belong. In that sense, it's not a reduced version of a truck. It's a completely different idea of what a truck can be. The Jeep Forward Control FC150 is one of those designs that immediately looks like it was built by solving a very specific problem and ignoring almost everything else in the process. Produced by Jeep, it was part of an era when utility mattered more than comfort, and when engineers were willing to experiment with radically different layouts to maximize function in demanding environments. At first glance, the FC150 does not look like a conventional pickup at all. Instead of a long hood with the engine in front and a cab positioned behind it, the entire cab is pushed forward over the front axle. This cab-over design was intended to shorten the overall length of the vehicle while preserving cargo bed space, making it easier to maneuver in tight work environments, industrial sites, farms, and off-road conditions. But the result was visually striking in a way few trucks of its time could match. The proportions look almost reversed compared to traditional pickups. The cab sits so far forward that it feels like the vehicle is trying to climb over its own front wheels. From certain angles, it resembles a box placed directly on top of a chassis, with minimal transition between the driving position and the road beneath it. That unusual layout is exactly what gave the Jeep Forward Control FC150 its strange character. Inside, the driving position is equally unusual. The driver sits extremely close to the front edge of the vehicle, with the road appearing almost directly beneath their feet. This creates a sensation that is very different from standard trucks of the era. Instead of looking over a long hood, the driver is essentially positioned above the front axle, which dramatically changes perception of space and distance. Some owners describe the experience as being more like operating machinery than driving a conventional vehicle. One former driver put it simply, "It felt like steering something from the front bumper." That impression is not far from the truth, at least psychologically. The visibility forward is excellent because there's almost nothing between the driver and the road ahead. Tight trail navigation, obstacle placement, and off-road positioning become easier to judge. In environments where precision matters more than comfort, this was a real advantage. However, that same design also created a sense of exposure and unfamiliarity for many drivers. There is very little physical buffer between the occupant and the outside world. The short front end means that impacts, vibrations, and road feedback are more immediate than in longer hooded vehicles. Even if the mechanical safety was comparable for its time, the psychological sensation of sitting so far forward could feel unusual. One owner described it memorably. "It felt like sitting in a brick that learned how to climb hills." Despite its odd proportions, the FC150 was not a novelty. It was a serious work vehicle designed for demanding conditions. Its compact overall length made it highly maneuverable in tight spaces where conventional pickups would struggle. For forestry work, construction sites, military applications, and rugged terrain, the design had clear practical advantages. The cargo bed, although shorter than full-size trucks, was still capable of carrying meaningful loads. Combined with Jeep's four-wheel drive system, the vehicle could reach places that would be difficult or impossible for larger, less agile trucks of the period. That combination of compact size and off-road capability defined its purpose. Where it struggled was on-road comfort and conventional usability. The unusual proportions could feel awkward in normal driving situations, especially at higher speeds or in traffic where the benefits of the design were less relevant. The cab-over layout, while efficient, also meant that ride quality transmitted more directly to occupants. Still, for many users, that was not the priority. Function came first, comfort came second, and style was almost incidental. Today, the Jeep Forward Control FC150 is remembered as one of the most distinctive Jeep designs ever produced. It stands out even within a brand known for unconventional engineering choices. Collectors and enthusiasts value it not only for its rarity, but for its unapologetically utilitarian philosophy. One enthusiast summarized its personality perfectly. "It doesn't care if you think it looks strange, it cares if it can get the job done." And that is ultimately the essence of the FC150, a vehicle that sacrificed conventional proportions and driver familiarity in exchange for maximum practicality in tight, demanding environments, resulting in one of the most visually unique and functionally focused pickups of its era. The Mini pickup is one of those wonderfully British automotive ideas that feels almost inevitable in hindsight, yet completely absurd the moment you actually see it in metal. Built by British Leyland as part of the long-running Mini family, it takes the already tiny Mini formula and stretches it just enough to qualify as a pickup, while still refusing to become anything resembling a conventional truck. At first glance, the concept sounds simple. Remove the rear seats, extend the body slightly, and add a cargo bed. But the result is something far more visually striking. The proportions of the Mini pickup are so compact that the entire vehicle looks almost compressed, as if the standard Mini was carefully shortened and then reshaped into a utility form rather than redesigned from scratch. The front remains unmistakably Mini: small, round headlights, a short bonnet, and that iconic upright stance. But instead of a hatchback or small estate rear, there is a tiny open bed that appears almost comically small compared to even modest expectations of a pickup truck. It is the kind of vehicle that makes people do a double take and then laugh. The cargo bed is the most talked about feature, or more accurately, the most joked about feature. It is so limited in size that owners often describe it as being more symbolic than functional. Realistically, it can carry small tools, light goods, or a modest amount of cargo, but anything approaching truck duties requires careful planning and realistic expectations. One owner famously joked, "It can carry anything you want as long as it fits in a suitcase and doesn't mind company." Another added, "The bed is just big enough to remind you it's a pickup and small enough to make sure you don't forget it's a Mini." Despite this limitation, the Mini pickup actually performs surprisingly well in its intended environment. Because it is based on the classic Mini platform, it retains the famous front-wheel drive layout, compact wheelbase, and exceptionally nimble handling characteristics. That means it can turn in incredibly tight spaces, navigate narrow streets, and squeeze through gaps that would be impossible for almost any conventional pickup. In crowded urban environments, especially older British towns with narrow roads and tight corners, this advantage is very real. Where larger trucks struggle with maneuvering, the Mini pickup simply continues forward without hesitation. One driver described it in a way that captures its personality perfectly. "It doesn't feel like driving a truck, it feels like a car that refuses to acknowledge obstacles." That sense of agility is what kept it useful despite its obvious physical limitations. Mechanically, it remains faithful to the simplicity of the original Mini design. Small displacement engines, lightweight construction, and straightforward engineering make it relatively easy to maintain. It was never intended to be powerful or fast, but rather efficient, economical, and practical within its very narrow definition of practical. Of course, by modern standards, and even by the standards of larger pickups of its own era, it is comically underpowered for serious hauling. But that was never really the point. The Mini pickup was designed to compete with full-size work trucks. It was designed to extend the Mini philosophy into light commercial use cases, small deliveries, urban trades, light-duty utility tasks. And it did those jobs with a kind of charm that more serious vehicles simply cannot replicate. Visually, it often creates an almost surreal impression today. Parked next to a conventional pickup truck, it looks less like a smaller version of the same idea and more like a completely different category of object. The comparison is almost humorous. One vehicle is designed for heavy-duty work, towing, and long-distance hauling, and the other looks like it might struggle with a single toolbox. Yet the Mini pickup has its own kind of confidence. It does not pretend to be what it is not. One enthusiast described it perfectly. It's not a small truck, it's a Mini that happens to have a bed. That distinction matters because it explains why the vehicle still has a strong following among collectors and enthusiasts today. People are not drawn to it for brute capability or rugged dominance. They are drawn to its honesty, its clever packaging, and its refusal to conform to traditional pickup expectations. It is also a snapshot of a very specific period in British automotive thinking, when manufacturers were willing to experiment with extreme variations of existing platforms to meet niche needs, without creating entirely new vehicles from the ground up. Today, the Mini pickup survives mostly as a cult classic. Surviving examples are often restored carefully, not because they're valuable in the traditional sense, but because they represent a unique intersection of practicality and absurdity. One collector summed up its appeal in a single line: "It's the smallest truck that still insists it has a job to do." And that's exactly why the Mini pickup remains memorable. It's not impressive in the way most trucks are supposed to be impressive. Instead, it's clever, funny,
and surprisingly capable within its own tiny world. A reminder that utility doesn't always need scale to be meaningful.
The Honda Acty, especially in its dump truck configuration, is one of those machines that perfectly captures how extreme Japan's K-vehicle philosophy could become when pushed all the way into practical industrial use. Built by Honda, the Acty was designed under Japan's strict K-class regulations, which heavily limited engine displacement and overall vehicle dimensions. Instead of treating those limits as a restriction, Honda treated them as a design challenge. How much real utility can you pack into something barely larger than a golf cart? The result, in dump truck form, looks almost surreal. At first glance, the Honda Acty dump version appears almost like a scaled model that escaped from a factory display. The cab is extremely narrow, the wheels are tiny, and the proportions are so compact that it feels like it should not be able to support adult passengers at all. And yet, it absolutely does. 2 occupants sit in a cab that feels more like a mechanical capsule than a traditional truck interior. But the real contradiction begins at the rear. Because behind that tiny cab sits a fully functional hydraulic dump bed. Not a simplified version, not a decorative feature, a real, working dumping mechanism capable of lifting and unloading sand, gravel, soil, or construction materials with the same basic principle used in full-size industrial trucks. The visual effect is what makes it unforgettable. Seeing something so small perform such a heavy-duty action creates a sense of scale confusion. The machine looks too light, too fragile, too toy-like to be involved in serious construction work, and yet it is doing exactly that. One observer famously described it, "It looks like a toy truck that somehow got a real job." That contrast between appearance and function is the heart of the Acty dump's charm. On construction sites, farms, and rural roads, however, the illusion disappears quickly. The truck is not pretending to be large or powerful. Instead, it is optimized for environments where larger vehicles would actually struggle. Narrow pathways, tight access points, greenhouse areas, orchards, and small construction zones are exactly where the Acty shines. Its compact footprint allows it to go places full-size dump trucks simply cannot reach. Where a large vehicle would require careful maneuvering or even risk damaging surrounding structures, the Honda Acty can slip through with minimal effort. One farmer summarized it perfectly. "It doesn't move a lot of material at once, but it moves it exactly where I need it." That is the key to understanding its design philosophy. It is not competing with heavy-duty trucks in terms of capacity. Instead, it is eliminating inefficiency in small-scale material handling. The hydraulic dump system itself is surprisingly capable for such a small platform. While it cannot handle extreme loads, it's more than sufficient for agricultural work, landscaping, light construction, and maintenance tasks. The mechanism is simple, reliable, and designed for repeated use rather than industrial-scale stress. Of course, the engine is equally modest. K-class restrictions mean the power output is limited and acceleration is never a priority. The Acty is not built for speed, highway cruising, or long-distance hauling. It's built for short, repetitive, highly practical movements within confined environments. One driver joked, "It doesn't hurry, it just slowly gets things done one bucket at a time." That philosophy defines the entire experience. Inside the cab, everything is functional and minimal. There's no attempt to luxury or excess, controls are simple, visibility is excellent due to the upright design, and the driving position feels more like operating a small piece of machinery than a conventional vehicle. Yet, despite its simplicity, or perhaps because of it, the Acty dump truck has earned deep respect among the people who actually use it. It's not admired for style or performance, but for reliability in extremely specific tasks where bigger vehicles become impractical. What makes the visual impression so powerful is the scale contradiction. In most parts of the world, a dump truck is associated with large industrial machinery, loud diesel engines, and massive payloads. The Honda Acty challenges that expectation completely by shrinking the concept down to its absolute minimum size while preserving the core function. One enthusiast described it in a way that captures the entire idea. It's not a small dump truck, it's a full dump truck that learned to live in a tiny body.
Today, the Acty dump version is widely appreciated among collectors and fans of K vehicles, especially outside Japan where it appears even more unusual. It often becomes a conversation piece at shows, not because of rarity or power, but because of the simple shock of seeing real construction functionality packaged into something so small. And that's why it remains so memorable. It proves that usefulness doesn't have to come in a large package, and that even the most industrial concepts can be reimagined at miniature scale without losing their essential purpose.
The Mazda Rotary pickup is one of those wonderfully strange experiments that only makes sense when you understand what Mazda was trying to do in the 1970s. Prove that its rotary engine technology wasn't just for sports cars, but could work in absolutely anything, even a pickup truck. At a time when most pickups were defined by simple, slow-revving, torque-heavy engines built for hauling and durability, Mazda went in the opposite direction. Instead of low-end grunt, they installed a high-revving rotary engine, the same basic concept used in cars like the RX series, into a utility platform. The result was immediate mechanical contradiction. On the road, the Mazda rotary pickup did not behave like a traditional truck at all. Where a conventional pickup feels like it builds power slowly and steadily, this one felt eager, rev-happy, and almost sporty in its response. The engine loved to spin quickly, producing a distinctive, smooth but high-pitched mechanical character that sounded more like a small race car than anything associated with hauling cargo. One driver described the sound in a memorable way. It didn't roar like a truck, it screamed like it was late for a qualifying lap. That character alone made it stand out, especially in an era when pickups were expected to be rugged, slow, and industrial in personality. But the contrast between engine philosophy and vehicle purpose created real-world limitations. The rotary engine, while innovative and smooth, is not naturally suited for heavy, low-speed torque demands, and that is exactly what pickup trucks typically require. As a result, the Mazda rotary pickup struggled in traditional hauling situations compared to its piston engine rivals. It could move quickly when lightly loaded, but when asked to perform typical truck duties, carrying weight, climbing with cargo, or operating under sustained load, it did not deliver the same kind of effortless pulling power customers expected. Fuel consumption was another major talking point. Rotary engines of the era were known for efficiency trade-offs, and in a work-oriented vehicle, that became especially noticeable. Owners quickly discovered that the truck's enthusiasm for revs came at the cost of frequent fuel stops. One owner summarized it bluntly: "It doesn't use fuel, it negotiates for more of it." That mismatch between performance personality and practical expectation became the defining feature of the truck. Visually, however, it looked fairly normal for a 1970s compact pickup. That normal appearance may have actually made the mechanical surprise even stronger for buyers who expected conventional behavior. You saw a small, simple truck, and then you heard and felt something completely different. This contrast confused some buyers in markets where pickups were viewed strictly as tools. Many customers had little familiarity with rotary engines, and those who did often associated them with niche sports cars rather than utility vehicles. As a result, the Mazda rotary pickup occupied a very unusual space, too unconventional for traditional truck buyers and too practical for sports car enthusiasts. Yet it was not without its charm. For drivers who appreciated its unique character, the truck offered something genuinely different. It could feel surprisingly quick when unloaded, responsive in a way most pickups of its time were not, and mechanically smooth thanks to the inherent characteristics of the rotary design. But in the real world of trucks, where durability, fuel economy, and torque matter most, it struggled to compete with conventional engines that were simply better suited for the job. One enthusiast later described it with a mix of admiration and irony. It was the only pickup that felt like it wanted to be a sports car, even when it was carrying lumber. Today, surviving examples are rare, largely because they were used hard, misunderstood, or simply outlasted by more practical alternatives. Those that remain are often appreciated not as serious workhorses, but as fascinating historical experiments from a time when Mazda was boldly exploring the limits of its rotary technology.
And that is why the Mazda Rotary pickup endures in automotive memory, not as the most capable truck, but as one of the most unusual, an experiment where sports car engineering and utility expectations collided in a way that produced something unforgettable, if not entirely practical.